Hello and welcome to our latest episode. It's Jay and Andy again, and this is the Rating Room podcast. Today we are discussing our very first Christmas film on the podcast. Today we are going to talk all about the Will Ferrell Christmas film Elf.
The Rating Room. The Rating Room.
Buddy, a human raised as an elf at the North Pole. Upon discovering his true identity, Buddy embarks on a journey to New York City to find his biological father while spreading joy and Christmas cheer. That is Elf in a nutshell. Or should that be a nutcracker, as it were, since we're on the festive season. But Jay, we have to start with the same questions each week. It's the one you're familiar with. Have you seen this film before, and what did you remember about it?
This is a film, Andy, that we watch every year at Christmas. And last year, if I recall, it wasn't on any of the streaming platforms that we use. So I had to buy I think it was DVD or maybe Blu-ray version. However, this time round, I managed to find it on one of the streaming platforms. So I'm pretty confident that I remembered everything, especially all the main plot points. As well, because we like I said, we watch it every year. So I'm trying to think. It would have been. I'm trying to think when my kids. So yeah, I would have watched it, Andy, since my eldest was born, because this one was obviously released before then. So it would have been on our rota every year. How about you, Andy? Is this something that you have seen before, and if so, how often do you watch it?
Many times I've seen this. It's one of those we watch every year as well in my house. Two films generally get watched every year at Christmas time, usually when we're wrapping presents and such. This one, what we're going to talk about today, and the other one, Jingle All the Way, which I don't think we're going to cover in great detail in the coming weeks, but we may allude to in our Christmas special in a few weeks' time. But that's just a really silly, fun film with Arnold Schwarzenegger and, action, comedy, capers. Just a nice, light-hearted, fun film. But that and Elf are every year must-see TV.
Jingle All the Way is one film I wouldn't say we watch every year, Andy, but it is a favourite of mine. However, I remember, I think it may be last year, I tried to get the kids to watch it, but they thought it was a bit dated. So I don't think they both managed to make it all the way through, but I do find it very funny, and I do like Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's in films that are moved away from the action films. I like when he does the comedy roles. But when you're saying you have two films on rotation every year, I would say one of my other films that I watch every year is Scrooged with Bill Murray.
Oh yes, that's another good one as well.
That's one of my favourites. And that is like what you said. That's one I will have when wrapping Christmas presents as well.
It's nice to have something Christmassy in the background when you're doing activities like that. Either that or like a Christmas music channel or something. But I've made a mental note of those films because we'll get back to them in a future episode, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So let's get back to Elf. So as always, we like to kick off the pod after Andy mentions so let me do that again. So, as always, we're going to talk about the box office. So, I'm going to kick things off, Andy. So, the budget for Elf was $32 million. The box office was $224.9 million. I like to be precise there. And that means the adjusted box office was $376.2 million. So, a healthy return for Elf. Now, I found this surprising. Elf debuted as the second highest film in the US weekend box office charts, and it fell behind The Matrix Revolutions, which also premiered during the same week. I had a feeling Elf was destined to be a number one.
I mean, I'm assuming it was released around Christmas. They didn't release it in like mid-May or something. So if it's a Christmas release, which I assume it was, that is very surprising that it wouldn't be top of the charts, especially considering how good it is. And we'll talk about how good it is very soon. But it did ascend to the number one position the following weekend, displacing Keanu Reeves as Neo. So Buddy did best Neo. Nevertheless, it was a brief time at the top because the following weekend, after that, it slipped down to third place behind Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat and Gothica. But it did remain top 10 of the weekend box office charts for 8 consecutive weeks.
And in terms of the 2003 films, it was ranked number 7 in top grossing films in the US box office charts and number 18 in the worldwide box office charts. So it saw success across worldwide and also domestically if you're in the US.
Indeed, yeah. And there were some real big films that kept it off the top spot. So some of the films that were ahead of Elf at the box office in 2003 include Finding Nemo, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, the aforementioned The Matrix Reloaded, and Bruce Almighty. That's a good list of films there. Now, let's peel another layer off this particular onion. So the film Elf was released in 2003, directed by Jon Favreau, and the soundtrack composer was John Debney. Now, Will Ferrell has featured in a number of films before landing the part of Buddy in Elf. Previous roles include Old School, where he played the role of Frank the Tank. He was also in Zoolander, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it appeared as 2 Austin Powers films as Mustafa. Now, I must admit, I didn't remember him in those films, the Austin Powers films, So I was racking my brain as to who and what Mustafa was, but it came back to me.
I've only seen the Austin Powers films, I would say, once for each of the Austin Powers films, because they're not my type of humour, but I have watched them. But I've got a feeling in my head what he looks like, because I only watched it once. So I like him as Frank the Tank. That is probably my favourite role, but we can talk about it a bit later on, can't we? Because his later credits include Barbie, which I've not seen, Daddy's Home 1 and 2, which I have seen out there, they're funny films, Get Hard, Step Brothers, The Other Guys, and the Anchorman films, which I've only ever seen Anchorman 1, I've not seen number 2. Now, James Caan plays Buddy's dad, Walter Hobbs, the very grumpy Walter Hobbs, and Caan is known for playing Sonny Corleone in The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2, and Caan earned nominations in the Academy Awards and Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor category.
Zooey Deschanel was Buddy's love interest, Jovi. Now, Zoe is featured in a range of films including The Good Girl, Yes Man, and 500 Days of Summer. I'm not sure I've seen any of those, actually.
I've seen Yes Man and 500 Days of Summer. 500 Days of Summer I watched only in the last couple of years because it's... So when we were talking about Gunship last week, Andy,
Yep.
The band, there's a YouTuber that I follow called Digital Gravity. I'm just trying to remember the name. And what this person does is they play the type of music I like, synthwave, but they overlay those against older films, not necessarily 80 films. And one of the songs that I like, the YouTuber has done over 500 Days of Summer, because 500 Days of Summer, Andy, I don't know if I should say this now because I'm going to kind of ruin the twist for you. I won't say it just in case you watch. It's a romance film and I don't want to ruin it for any listeners out there that haven't watched it, but there's a little twist to it which is really clever. But Yes Man, I think, is the film with Jim Carrey where he has to say yes to everything.
Yeah, I believe that's based on the book by Danny Wallace, if memory serves correctly, and I've read that book.
Have you?
And I've read a couple of Danny Wallace books. Very, very interesting stuff, because he did this and got into quite a few scrapes as a result, as you might imagine. But very, very good book. He also did one, I think it was called Join Me, where he basically left a note somewhere. I don't know if it was online or just like a notice board, and it was Join Me, just to see if anyone would respond to it. And he ended up like forming a cult accidentally. It was very, very bizarre. But a couple of book recommendations there for those interested.
Nice one, thank you. And I just checked, and it is definitely the Jim Carrey film. Just double checked while you were talking there, Andy. So, getting back to Alf, there was a Broadway musical which was created in 2010 and was based on the film. Now, the film also has an animated special titled Elf Buddy's Musical Christmas, which I've personally not seen. And it features the voice of Mark Hamill as Walter Hobbs, who obviously Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker.
There you go. Does it also, again, I've not seen it, but I think this is true. The voice of Buddy is Jim Parsons, who plays Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory, if memory serves me correctly. I'm pretty sure of that. You do some live Googling, I'll carry on.
You are correct, Andy.
Some of the notes. There you go.
Yeah, correct. We were watching
Should
Big
get
Bang
points
Theory
for that.
earlier. We've retired the quiz in this season, in season 3.
Just when I'm bringing out the knowledge as well. But there were rumours that a sequel would be made, titled Elf 2, Buddy Saves Christmas. In 2013, Favreau said he was interested in making the sequel. However, Will Ferrell said he didn't really want to make one. 2016, Favreau again stated that a sequel could still happen. Ferrell again put a stop to it, said he's got no interest in making a sequel. And then 4 years after that, Khan said in an interview with Yahoo Entertainment, Favreau and Ferrell don't get along, and that's why the sequel was unlikely.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that is, Andy. And before Farrell landed the part of Buddy, Jim Carrey, and we've obviously mentioned him a few minutes ago, and Chris Farley were both linked to the role. Now, the original script was written in 1993 and underwent several different rewrites, with the original script being much darker in tone. However, the script was eventually written to attract a PG rating instead of the older PG-13 rating that Favreau believed the darker script would attract. I couldn't imagine this being a darker Christmas film. I think that they did right by changing it.
I think they did right as well. Although I think Jim Carrey would have been an interesting choice for the role of Buddy. I think Will Ferrell did a great job, but I think Jim Carrey could have pulled it off. Originally offered the directing job was Terry Zwickhoff, but he declined to make another Christmas film, Bad Santa. Now, the film doesn't feature that many scenes with CGI. In fact, the director claims that the only CGI used for the film was for some snow. Otherwise, everything was based on motion control models and matte paintings. And they also used something called forced perspective to make Buddy appear larger. For example, the scenes in the North Pole include two sets, one smaller than the other. I think the forced perspective thing is something we've alluded to in either a previous episode or just when we've been chatting, to do with Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And with Gandalf and the Hobbits, isn't it? The Hobbits? Do I mean the Hobbits?
Yeah.
I mean the Hobbits, yeah. Gandalf and the Hobbits.
Yeah, I can't remember which episode, if we did it on there. But Andy, one of the things that Favreau was really keen on. So I didn't notice this when watching it, but it came out during the research. Was apparently in the bits in the North Pole where you've got the larger sets and the smaller sets, you can see on screen, if you look carefully, where it actually kind of joins. And Favreau said in an interview they wanted to kind of make it authentic, so they could have used CGI to blur the where the two merge. However, in the future, when CGI moves on, they didn't want it to look really obvious like that, so that's why they kept the CGI to a minimum, because they wanted that authentic kind of old style Christmas film. But I personally didn't notice, and it's really good how they do those kind of full perspective scenes.
Very, very clever. I didn't notice anything of the sort either.
Yeah, so it's let's move on. We've given some facts and figures to our listeners, so let's jump into the film. So actually, Andy, before I jump into the film, I want to ask you a couple of quick questions, really, before we start talking about Elf. Andy, do you like Will Ferrell? Because this is obviously the first film that we've watched with him in it in the podcast. And if you do you have a particular favourite film that we might watch in the future?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Will Ferrell and the whole Frat Pack, really, in those kind of movies. The ones that stick out for me would be Step Brothers, Anchorman, and Blades of Glory. And you mentioned you'd not seen Anchorman 2. There's actually a third Anchorman. Did you know there's I think what they did is they basically took outtakes and deleted scenes from the first film, spliced them together to make a whole new film. and it was a direct-to-DVD release, and I've seen that as well. That was probably not as good as the original, but still quite a good effort considering how they put it together. But yeah, very, very good films, the Anchorman ones. And speaking of, no, I'm not speaking of Anchorman. Now, one actress I do want to mention is Mary Steenburgen, who plays Walter's wife and Buddy's stepmother in Elf. Now, she's an actress we've spoken about before from the film Philadelphia, but she's also in the film Step Brothers as Will Ferrell's mother.
And I've not seen Blaze of Glory or Step Brothers, Andy. So you've obviously recommended them.
Step Brothers especially, I would highly, highly recommend. It's a very, very funny, silly film.
Yeah, I might put that on my watch list if I can find it, if it's on any of the streaming platforms. Step Brothers. Because I think, I can't remember the actor's name, but I remember seeing the front cover.
John C. Reilly is his stepbrother.
Yes, he's in Gangs of New York as well, yeah. Yes, I will. Yeah, because I think when I think about Will Ferrell, and I can see why people like him, but I think he's like when you mentioned about Jim Carrey earlier. Will Ferrell kind of has that tendency to kind of overact sometimes, or he's silly, and sometimes I think it works, sometimes I think it doesn't work. So for me, when I look through his the films that he's done, the ones that jump out for me that I really enjoy is Old School, where he plays Frank the Tank. And you mentioned the Frat Pack, and that's obviously got Luke Wilson in and Vince Vaughn, as we were talking about those earlier, off air. And the two Daddy's Home films I find really funny as well, with Mark Wahlberg and, from memory, Mel Gibson in Daddy's Home too. I thought they're very funny. Anchorman, I have watched the first one, and I can imagine, like where you said that they managed to take lots of bits that they didn't include in the first one, because, you know, in some films when they kind of do, I don't know if it's in Anchorman, but you know, at the end they put all the kind of bloopers. I can't remember if they did it in Anchorman, but I remember seeing bloopers for Anchorman, and because a lot of stuff they might just ad lib. Yeah,
they tend to do that quite a lot in those kind of films. But yeah, this was bloopers and deleted scenes, and they obviously had so much material. It was a really clever idea, but I don't think they fully capitalised on it, because they did it, like I said, straight to DVD, or it may have even been like bonus content on a DVD release of Anchorman. But definitely worth watching. Not as good as the two actual films, but worth an hour or two of your time. But let's talk Elf, shall we? So let's get into the film proper. At the start, we're informed there are only 3 different jobs that an elf can do: make shoes, baking cookies in a tree, and building toys in Santa's workshop.
And the film starts, so we go back in time by 30 years. So Buddy is 30 years old, and we are in a children's orphanage run by nuns. And we see Buddy crawl into Santa's toy sack because he's still awake as a baby.
Yeah, now the reason he gets the name Buddy is because he's wearing little Buddy diapers. And I was thinking to myself, it's a good thing he wasn't wearing like Pampers or Huggies.
Yes, that it wouldn't have had the same ring to it. And we later on, so we do see Buddy working, and he's in front of some shelves, and behind him there's a little, well, there's not little, there's numerous Mr. Potato Heads, and they're obviously not the same ones as in Toy Story, but I thought it was a nice little nod that we've picked up here with Mr. Potato Head, as we've discussed in Toy Story before. Now, we see that Buddy is testing toys because he's moved from his toy production job due to his low output.
Yes, now, I've made a note about this, but before I go on to that, do you want me to bore the listeners for a minute or two with a fun fact that I found out just today?
Yeah, go for it.
So I've been to the National Space Centre today with my son, and they've on one of the floors they've got a history wall where it's showing the history of like things that have happened with the space journey, but then also things that have happened at the same time, so you can kind of compare what's happening with the space race versus what's happening in society. And one of the facts was that on the 30th of April 1952, the very first toy advertised on television was Mr. Potato Head, and then it went on sale the very next day. So there you go. I saw that fun fact and I thought of you, Jay.
Well, Andy, So thank you for thinking of me. So I don't know if you are too young, but when I was a kid, I used to use real potatoes and then put those little attachments on to make Mr. Potato Head. So, because I'm a little bit older than you, so I don't know if they still did those kind of things when you was a nipper.
Not so much in my time. I mean, obviously you're talking about pre-Irish potato famine, aren't you? That's how far back you're going here.
Yes, during the war, in the Cold War, where lights had to be off and we were using potatoes. But no, that's a fun fact, Andy.
There you go. Yeah. So any listeners that weren't asleep may be asleep by now after that boring fact. But I just thought I'd throw that in there because it was topical from my adventures today. But back to the film. So you mentioned that he's testing toys now because his production his output is too low, isn't it? And I guess you'd call him a supervisor, elf, comes to say, and he says something like, "Oh, how many have you done?" And he says 85, and he has to take his scroll out and goes, "Oh, that means you're 915 short." So he needs a scroll to work out 1,000 minus 85. I mean, what a thicko! Thicko, that's not a PC word, is it?
Quick math, Andy. Quick math.
Yeah, thicko. No, there's no excuse for it. What a thicko! Interestingly, the director Jon Favreau used a remote control to trigger the Jack in the Box toys to surprise Ferrell. So I guess he'll get in actual reactions rather than acting, which is quite a clever move.
No, definitely. Now, there are several scenes that follow which show Buddy overhearing that he's not actually an elf and is in fact a human. So he's being a bit slow here. But then it's really good because then it cuts to some flashbacks of Buddy being too big in his surroundings. So there's one example for me, Andy, is I can relate to the shower scene. So whenever I go to certain hotels or B&Bs, because I'm quite tall, the shower head is pretty much at my chest level. So I have to bend down and blimmin' do my hair. But I thought that was funny. And did you have any that you wanted to kind of pick out?
Yeah, I mean, the one that stood out to me was when Buddy was sat on Papa Elf's knee. I just thought that was a really funny visual.
Because, Andy, I got this confused with another Christmas film because, I can't remember its name, but it has Vince Vaughn in. And it's where, is it that one actually? Because there's another Christmas film where one of the elves likes a blonde, good-looking elf, and she's a famous actress. And eventually, this elf gets the courage to ask her out. And I can't remember, because I was thinking, is it this film? And then obviously it never happened, and I was thinking, oh, it's not this film. And then I thought, is it the Vince Vaughn one where he plays Santa's brother? And then I'm thinking,
Fred Claus.
Yeah, but then I'm thinking, I don't think it is that, because he loves someone in America. And he didn't have a dad or anything, because obviously his brother was Santa Claus. So I thought, no, it's not that one. Do you know what I mean? There's one where she has blonde hair, and the elf manages to get the courage, or someone in Lapland, the North Pole, gets the courage to ask her out, and I can't think what it is. But I got confused because I was waiting for this blonde elf, good-looking elf that was full size, but obviously it never happened.
I don't recall it, to be honest, because when you were mentioning it, I thought you were talking about later on with Jovi, but of course she's not an elf; she's just working as an elf. So no, I'm gonna have to plead the fifth on that one, as our American friends might say. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll let you Google that, and we'll carry on in your absence. So, Buddy's off to New York City. He wants to meet his real family, his real dad. Santa's giving Buddy some advice about the city, but then he also drops the bombshell that Buddy's dad is actually on the naughty list. But it's okay, because he suggests that Buddy might be able to help redeem him with some good old-fashioned Christmas spirit.
So I'm going to have to pause my live research here, Andy, because I want to make sure we do the podcast. But if this goes out and Andy hasn't cleverly edited in the answer, then listeners, let me know, what is that Christmas film where there's a blonde actress playing an elf, and eventually the character, not the main character, manages to get the courage to ask her out. And I can even imagine in my head who the male actor is as well, but I can't remember his name. Oh no, it's not that one. No. Anyway, I'm going to have to research that later because it's getting right on my nerves, Andy. So I think it's someone like Jenny McCarthy or something is a pretty blonde lady. I can't remember if it's there or not, but I'm going to carry on. Yeah, I'm going to carry on because it's very frustrating.
So I've googled elf asks a blonde on a date, and I've googled man asks a blonde elf on a date, and the two films that come up are Elf and Fred Claus. So I think we're going to be stuck in this cycle of. It is. It's Fred
Claus. It is Fred Claus. I've just looked at the cast list, and it's the elf Willie, and it's Elizabeth Banks. The
Elizabeth, of course,
the good-looking
yes.
blonde, and that is it. And that's where I just got confused here because I was expecting Elizabeth Banks to appear in Elf, and obviously she didn't.
It never happened.
But yes, But Fred Claus is a good film. I enjoyed that film as well. Vince Vaughn.
Good, yeah.
Yes.
Our listeners have just taken about a 10-minute comfort break there whilst we've rambled on senselessly.
Yeah. So let's get back into it. Where were we?
Welcome back, listeners. Let's get back to Elf. Jay, go ahead.
At least we were talking about another Christmas film and we didn't start talking about James Bond or something else.
Well, there's still time.
So Buddy's now in New York City and he's exploring, and he thinks he's found Santa because there's this random bloke in a red outfit and a white beard walking down the street, but it's just a random bloke. It's not Santa at all.
Yes, it's an easy mistake to make, I guess. We see him later on. He's eating some old chewing gum that he's found on the street, obviously not listening to Santa's advice because he warned him about that, didn't he, before he left?
Indeed, yeah, he didn't heed the advice. And Andy, I just want to jump back to the random bloke in a red outfit. As part of the research, I found, Andy, that the very last day of shooting was the director, Jon Favreau, and Will Ferrell, and a cameraman, and some money. So they wanted to do some shots with random people in New York City, or just, where I think the film is in Canada. And the shots at the beginning of here where they're just seeing random people, that is where they found this random bloke. So he's just a random bloke walking in the street. So he's a random bloke, he's not part of the film. And they gave him some money and said, can we just get Will Ferrell to come up to you and just do some lines and then go? And they said, yeah. And that's how they did it. So it was in fact just a random bloke walking around in that red outfit and a nice jolly white beard.
Right, nice money if you can make it.
Yeah. So Buddy finds Walter at work, but Walter and his secretary mistake him for a Christmasgram messenger, and Walter has him escorted off the premises. So he's very grumpy, very grumpy.
Yeah, this is a good scene. I really like this. But it's the part where Walter turns to his secretary and says, "We should call security." And you just see Buddy appear on the other side and goes, "I like to whisper too." Just very, very funny delivery there. Walter's security guards, as they're getting Buddy out of the way, they sarcastically tell him to go to the local Gimbals department store, which is exactly what Buddy does. And that's where he meets Jovi, and he is instantly smitten.
He is instantly smitten. Now, originally, they wanted to use Macy's department store. However, there was a creative difference. So they were talking originally to Macy's department store. However, the scene that broke those discussions was the bit where Buddy is talking to the fake Santa, and Macy's department store didn't want people to think they had a fake Santa. They wanted it to feel that Santa was genuine. So they had some creative differences there, but that was the main sticking point. However, so they did end up using Gimbals name instead, which Andy has just mentioned, which is a nod to the film Miracle on 34th Street, which is another favourite film and one that we watch. Andy is another one we watch on rotation, actually. We've got that on DVD somewhere. The one with Richard Attenborough. I always get Richard and David mixed up. Not the very original one, but it's the one with Richard. Yeah, David's the nature.
David's the nature guru.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's a very good film as well. Now, the real gimbals actually ceased trading in the late 80s. So the company name was owned by a third party. So the producers were able to license the name and use it in the film as they wanted to. So good on the legal department there.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And a good nod to Miracle on 34th Street as well. Another really good Christmas film. Now, there's a scene where Buddy starts singing. He's in the middle of Santaland at Gimbals. And Will Ferrell just improvised this song on the spot. The lyrics weren't scripted in any way. Again, another funny scene.
It is. I just find it when you do like things like research or just watch things about film, Andy, or anything like that. I always find it really interesting where you hear and you read where actors have ad-libbed stuff or improvised, and it makes it into the film, because it's kind of saying, I not necessarily saying I can do the script better, but I think I can bring something different to that scene that someone else hasn't envisaged yet. Yeah,
I know what you mean. And also, I guess it depends on the director as well, or the script writers, if they allow you to do that, or whether they say, no, cut, you stick to the script exactly. So they're giving that creative license. But yeah, it's a very funny scene. I know we've not kind of talked about it in great detail, but I like the argument between Buddy and the kind of the floor manager.
That is,
and,
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those where I was just smiling all the way through, because he's so annoying, isn't he, Buddy? Really, when you think about
yeah.
it. And he's like, "There's no singing in the North Pole." Yes, there is. No, there's not. Yes, there is.
Because you can imagine, can't you? It's Christmas time. The store's really, really busy. The floor manager is probably under pressure to meet certain sale targets, and all you need is someone working for you who doesn't even work there. He just thinks he's been brought in by corporate or something, doesn't he? So, and it's just like...
It's such a good scene. But yeah, just the whole... when he's trying to say what's happening at the North Pole, and it's like, yes, there is.
Now, Buddy's heard that Santa will be at the store to make an appearance the following day, so Buddy redecorates the store overnight, which is really, really good. Really amazing decorations. There's Lego models as well. However, he discovers that the gimbal Santa is not the genuine article, and Buddy unmasks him and causes a brawl that the manager that Andy just mentioned breaks up. Now, Andy, just before you jump in, that scene had to be filmed in one take because of all the damage that was caused. So they nailed it in one take.
That's again another really, really good scene. Just going back when he finds out and he shouts, "Santa, I know him." I've actually got that on a t-shirt, a Christmas t-shirt of their own. But I do like the unmasking and the "you're sitting on a throne of lies," or whatever the quote is, with the little kid there. But following the brawl, we see that Buddy has sent Walter a Christmas card on a present. The card includes a photo of Walter and Buddy's mum. And the present is some lingerie, which he saw earlier when he was picking out, what did it say, for someone special. He clearly didn't quite understand what that meant.
Yeah, that's a funny bit. Now, Buddy is being kept at the local police station, and Walter does bail Buddy out. So the card has worked. And Walter takes him to the doctor for a DNA test, which confirms that Buddy is indeed Walter's biological son. And I just want to say, Andy, that must be the quickest DNA test ever.
That is pretty impressive, isn't it? It's clearly a very expensive doctor that Walter is going to. The doctor in question is played by Jon Favreau himself. Now, Favreau has either directed or featured in a range of films, including the Iron Man MCU franchise, Chef, the live-action version of The Jungle Book, and the 2019 The Lion King remake. Now, I personally remember him from Friends as Monica's boyfriend. That's the character that stands out for me. The rich guy who wants to be the ultimate fighting champion and gets his ass handed to him.
That's funny because I remember that now. Yeah, I wondered where you're going with that bit. But I've seen the film Chef, which is really good. I think of him as the actor, as the bodyguard in Iron Man films. That's why I tend to think. Happy, I think his name is.
Yeah, he's got quite the resume, hasn't he? Also responsible for creating the Disney Plus Star Wars TV show The Mandalorian.
A very good show. And we alluded to that last week, if I'm not mistaken, in our sequel special. Now, we see that Walter is under a lot of pressure at work, and he's a bit grumpy of a Scrooge too. And the recent discovery that Buddy is actually Walter's son is adding pressure to the work situation, and also pressure on the family as well.
Yeah, no, I've added a note here, and it's really so I can test out my acting skills on you again. But there's a really funny scene where the family are having dinner, and Walter's busy, so he takes his dinner to his room, and Michael, his son, says he wants to do the same, and he says to his mum, "I've got a bunch of homework, and I'm way behind on a bunch of stuff." And that's supposed to be like a Godfather-style accent, but Michael does it much better. I just thought that was a really, really funny scene, so I thought I'd try that out.
No, I agree, because Andy, at this point, Michael's not keen on Buddy either, is he? It's only the future stepmom that seems to be more open to Buddy staying at the house, isn't it?
Yes, agreed. The men of the family are not so welcoming, shall we say.
Indeed, however, that does change now. So we do have the scene where Buddy and Michael are ambushed by some bullies, and we see them having a snowball fight. However, Buddy has some impressive snowballing skills, and they overcome the bullies. This scene always makes me smile. I do like this scene.
This is a good scene. I mean, if we were going down the continuity route, we'd say there's far too many snowballs flying around before before Buddy fights back. So where are they all coming from? But my question here is, how is he so fast at making and throwing the snowballs, but yet he's so slow at making toys?
I don't know, Andy. When I saw your comment, Andy, I thought that is a good spot there, because if I recall correctly, Michael, the camera's panned on Michael, he's building one snowball. It kind of turns, and Buddy's already kind of got both arms full of snowballs.
Yes. Yeah, I think Michael may be on his second one, and Buddy's on about his 50th.
But no, it's that's what he could do in Lapland, the North Pole, build snowballs, and he would meet his quota of 1,000 with no problem at all. Now, we also discover a little throwaway comment Buddy makes about he has a restraining order against him as well because of the fight with the fake Santa gimbals. However, Buddy does manage to ask Jovi out on a date.
He does, yeah. So the romance is in the air. But before that, there's work to be done. So Buddy joins Walter at work. He's being his usual annoying self, getting on Walter's nerves. So he sends him down to the mailroom. He says, "Oh, you've never seen a mailroom before," and sells it as this magical, shiny workspace. Buddy makes friends with one of the mailroom workers, who gives him some alcohol because he sees that he's pouring some into his coffee and he thinks it's syrup. Now, the worker in question, my note here is, he claims to be 26 years old. And my God, that is the oldest 26-year-old I've ever seen in my life. Now, interesting side note to that. So Favreau had cast the actor in another film, had to cut the scene out. Producers were not keen on the scene and originally wanted to cut it. However, the director pushed back and said the apparent age discrepancy was actually part of the joke. And the actor in question, I believe, would have been 46 at the time, not 26. So you can understand my shock when he said his age out loud without knowing that extra information.
Yeah, and so I watched this with my wife, and one of my daughter watched it with me as well, with us, should I say. And we all said, when he said 26, we were all like, 26? That's no way possible. And my wife here, so this is a bit of a face blindness alert, and there's an ongoing theme here. Now, my wife commented to say that the actor looks like a like Nicolas Cage even let himself go. So I don't know what your view is, Andy, hearing that, because I then ended up Googling the actor's face and just seeing if there were different photos to see. And you could kind of argue very, very faintly Nicolas Cage, but
through like frosted glass, if you were watching the film Con Air, you know, you could get that.
Yes.
I guess if your wife was a bit more current with modern lingo, she might have said, "Looks like Nicolas Cage if you'd ordered him from Wish.com." There you go. Down with the kids.
That is very hip, Andy. Now, Buddy and Jovi have their date, and it goes well for both of them, and the date ends with a kiss.
Yes, that's blossoming romance, has to be said, between the two. Now, back at work, though, Walter is up against it. They've got a meeting to discuss a new book idea with the team. And in walks Miles Finch, who they've flown in specially for the occasion. The meeting, however, doesn't go particularly well because Buddy comes storming into the office and he wants to tell his dad just how in love he is, and then he sees Miles Finch from across the desk, and several times calls him an elf, and that does not sit well with Miles Finch, or indeed with Walter, who sends Buddy away. And I think he's pretty harsh with him, isn't he? Saying basically like, "Get out of my office, get out of my life," or something along those lines. It's pretty final at that point. Now, if you're wondering why Buddy is calling Finch an elf on several occasions, it may be because of the height of the man involved. Now, Miles Finch was played by Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage, of course. So now, if you've not seen the film, you can maybe visualise why that may be the case.
And Andy, I saw something on social media, and I've not fact-checked this because, to be fair, I forgot about it until you just mentioned this. Now, I saw on social media that someone has stated that Peter Dinklage character has the most minutes across Game of Thrones series. And I don't know what because he's in it a lot, but someone has claimed that they've counted all the minutes and he has the most screen time apparently in terms of all the main actors.
Well, I'll fact check that for you right now. I mean, he's in from start to finish, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Spoiler alert.
Yes, he survives pretty well. According to comicbook.com, Tyrion Lannister, 679 minutes of screen time. Jon Snow, 651. Daenerys Targaryen, 521. Cersei Lannister, 425. Sansa Stark, 418. There's your top 5. So there you go. If we were doing a rank bank on the Game of Thrones screen time, there it is for you. So you've got your bonus content within the episode. Don't say we don't give you anything.
Now, let's get back to Alf. So later on, we see Buddy spots the real Santa having trouble with his sleigh over Central Park. And it's nice that he's spotted Santa. So at this point, Walter's quit his job because, if I remember correctly, his boss has basically said he's got to do this piece of work. But Michael's come into the meeting room and said Buddy's gone missing, and then they leave the meeting, and the boss threatens him and he quits his job. Now, back to Buddy and Santa explains to Buddy that he's lost the sleigh's engine and it can't fly due to the shortage in Christmas spirit, which was mentioned earlier in the film when Papa Elf was showing Elf the sleigh and the engine as well. Now, Buddy manages to find the missing engine, and he also meets up with Walter and Michael, so they have a bit of a reunion.
They do, indeed. It seems like Walter has turned a new leaf, and he's back on the good side of things. But they need to get some Christmas spirit, so they've got an idea. Michael gets Santa's list and decides to read it out in front of the television news cameras to prove that Santa's real. Now, I've got a continuity alert here. So we saw the book just a few minutes earlier, and we see the visual. The names are in a completely random order, it seems. And Michael is reading some names out, completely random order, it would seem. And then he asks for the name of the news reporter, and she tells him Charlotte Denham or Denham, or something beginning with D anyway, because what he does when he's looking up her name is he's going D, because he's looking alphabetically, but the book's not alphabetical. We've seen that already. So huge continuity error there on the part of Michael, and maybe it's Santa's fault, actually. Maybe his book needs to be a little bit more organised.
Andy, I never picked that up, so well spotted there. A virtual pat on the back, Andy, because I never picked that up. But yeah, like you said, it is definitely shown where he's looking up her name, because if I remember, he flicks through some pages, doesn't he? And then, like you said, he must have found the first letter, etc., and carried on. So that's a good spot, that. And we don't do mistakes, do we? A little segment. We did that in James Bond season 1, but
we did. So told you we'd talk about James Bond eventually.
Touche, Andy. Now let's get back to Alf. So a group of Central Park Rangers, who are very angry at Santa because, as Santa's mentioned, that he placed them on a naughty list. They chase the sleigh as Buddy is trying to reattach the engine.
Yeah, but the engine's not all that's needed. They still need that Christmas spirit. So Jovi decides to lead the crowd and those on watching the television cameras, the filming, in singing Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And it's at the point where Walter finally joins in, and he's not just miming anymore, that's where they get enough Christmas spirit to fully power the sleigh without the engine, and off Santa and Buddy and the reindeers fly into the sky of New York City.
And this scene, I think, like you mentioned, it's a funny scene with the news reporter. And I think out of all the film, Andy, this is probably my personal favourite, the bit with Michael in the book and he, the news reporter, I can't remember the exact words, where Michael says something about she's waiting for a lazy boyfriend to buy a Tiffany engagement ring or something, isn't it? And I think that whole bit with Jovi singing these I don't know, they say 5 minutes is my favourite in the whole film.
It's a very good way. Yeah, it's a proper happy ending, isn't it? I've not wrote the quote down exactly, but it's something along the lines of she wants a Tiffany engagement ring and for a lazy boyfriend to just commit already, or something like that, wasn't it? But yeah, very nice way to get a happy ending out of the film. The film itself ends with us finding out that Walter has started his own publishing company. Obviously, he told his boss, up yours, earlier on. And the first book is the book that Buddy has written about his life. They claim it's fictional. I don't know if you caught that when they were describing it. They said it's the fictional story, but it's clearly his life story. And we also see that Buddy and Jovi are married and with child. And they bring their newborn daughter to see Papa Elf. And we end the film on a happy note. Merry Christmas to all. Christmas spirit is restored. Just a really, really joyous, happy film. Which leads me to the all-important ratings. We can't have the rating room without any ratings. So, Jay, I'll let you go first. What did you give Elf out of 10? So,
I gave Elf a very respectable 8 out of 10. It is, like we've both said, is on our yearly annual rotation. It's not my favourite Christmas film, probably because of Will Ferrell, to be fair. But I think it's a feel-good film. There's no the minor hiccup. In these Christmas films and most films, there's always something that happens that kind of pushes the relationship behind, or the issue that needs to be resolved. I like the innocence of Buddy with Jovi as well. You've got the relationship with Walter, and then Walter, his kind of development throughout the film as well. Kind of, he's like Ebenezer Scrooge, isn't he? Kind of like the Christmas Carol, the grumpy character. So I think it's a solid 8 out of 10 for me. What about you, Andy?
So, Jay, for me, it's an 8 out of 10 as well. It's one of my favourite Christmas films. I just really enjoyed it. I watched the whole thing with a smile on my face. It's a nice, family-friendly, happy, just a joy to watch. Just a very, very happy, nice film. And you can't say that all the time about films. Whether it's the grittiness or sometimes they go dark, and I don't know. This is just one of those where you just sit down for an hour and a half or whatever it is, and you just smile. Fantastic Christmas film. So 8 out of 10 for me.
Thank you. And out of interest, Andy, did your wife watch it, or has she watched it before? I'm guessing, like you said, it's an annual one, so I don't think you send your wife off to sit in a spare room or something while you watch it.
I send her out. I went, no, no. She did watch it with me last night, and we watch it many, many times together. She's a big fan of Elf.
Very good. Is she a big fan of Will Ferrell, like you are?
So. I think she'll watch some films with me. I don't think she's ever really stated her opinion on him either way.
So, IMDb, 7.1 out of 10, which I thought would have been a bit higher, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that seems a little bit low, but Rotten Tomatoes pick up the slack because they have 85% on the tomatometer with a 79% audience score. Quite respectable. So, let's end things as we should with our regular feature, the Rank Bank. Now, this is where we go over various ratings and rankings over films. Now, for this, we're doing things slightly differently because obviously we're not doing a James Bond franchise. We're not doing a series of Tom Hanks films. So we've got some all new rankings. Well, not some all new rankings. Sorry. So we've got some all new rank bank tables to slot these things into. So this will evolve over the coming weeks. It'll make sense. Well, you'll stick with it. Jay, why don't you kick us off with some run times?
Yeah, so we are keeping run times in season 3, and as Andy briefly touched on a few minutes ago, Elf was 1 hour 36 minutes, so it goes in at number 1.
So I'll move on to the box office, as Jay alluded to earlier. $23 million budget yielded a worldwide box office of $224.9 million. Now, we're going to be ranking on the adjusted box office, of course, like we did for season 2. So at the moment, film 1 goes in at place number 1, with the adjusted box office being $376.2 million.
Now, the all-important film scores, and obviously me and Andy have already gave our rankings, and it's an easy one this week, Andy, because we've only watched the one film. So we are doing things slightly different in the film scores this season because, as Andy mentioned, James Bond, we ranked and rated all the films in a nice little table. With Tom Hanks, we rated and ranked all the different films in a nice little Tom Hanks score. Now, because we're going to be touching on lots of different films and genres this season, we've decided to split out the rankings, so we're going to focus on the different genres. So we've classed Elf as a comedy film, so in our comedy film rankings, Elf goes in at number 1, and I gave it 8 out of 10. Andy, how about you? Do you just want to remind our listeners what you gave it?
Yeah, just for absolute clarity, 8 out of 10 for me as well. So it's number 1 on the comedy rank bank as things stand. But listen out in coming weeks because we're going to be doing rankings based on various genres. And we'll get back to some more comedy at some point. Don't worry about that. So until such time, there's only one on the list, and that is Elf in at number 1 spot. So that brings us to the end of another episode of The Rating Room. Thank you for listening, everybody. Jay, why don't you point people to our socials and all the usual places where they can find us?
Yeah, so you can send us any questions, suggestions, feedback. If there's any Christmas films that you think we should watch in the future, just contact us via our social media channels or by reaching out to us at theratingroom@gmail.com.
We've got a website, www.theratingroom.com, of course, and our YouTube channel at The Rating Room.
You can find us on all social media sites by searching for @theratingroom. And make sure you subscribe to all our channels to stay up to date with the latest news.
So that brings us to the end of our Christmassy edition of The Rating Room, but it's not Christmas yet, so shall we do another Christmas film next week?
Sounds good. Yeah, I think so.
Is that a yay? Is that a nay? Or is that a yippee-ki-yay? We'll see you next week for Die Hard.
The Rating Room.